The bear's cub was drowning in the water. What happened next will break your heart. The summer sun filtered gently through the tall pines of Whispering Woods, casting dappled golden light across the forest floor. A cool breeze whispered through the leaves, carrying with it the earthy scent of moss and river water. Nathan Mitchell knelt on a large flat rock by the edge of Silver Creek, arranging a modest picnic of sandwiches, berries, and lemonade, while his wife Olivia laid out a blanket nearby, brushing away a few pine needles with a fond smile. Their German shepherd, Rex, paced along the stream's edge with measured curiosity, his ears perked and nose twitching as he sniffed the cool morning air. The forest around them felt timeless and untouched, a world apart from the busy city life they had left behind for the weekend. Silver Creek gurgled softly as it wove its way through the woods, its waters glittering in the sunlight like strands of liquid crystal. Birds chirped in the canopy above, and the distant knock-knock of a woodpecker echoed from deep within the trees. Olivia handed Nathan a sandwich and sat beside him on the blanket, their shoulders touching as they both exhaled in perfect unison. Rex, sensing the humans were finally still, plopped down a few feet away, his thick fur ruffling in the breeze. His eyes remained alert, ever watchful, but his posture was relaxed. They had come here to find peace, and for the first hour, peace was exactly what they found. "I miss this," Olivia murmured, watching a dragonfly skim the surface of the water. "Just us out here, no deadlines, no meetings, no phones." Nathan nodded. "We should do this more often." "I think Rex agrees." The shepherd wagged his tail lazily in response, his tongue lolling from the side of his mouth in an expression that could only be described as contentment. They ate in easy silence, the kind shared by two people who had long since learned the language of being together without needing words. Occasionally, one would point out a bird or a squirrel, and the other would follow their gaze with soft appreciation. Time seemed to stretch like warm taffy, slow and sweet. It was around midday when the tranquility shifted. Rex was the first to notice. His ears twitched forward, and he rose from his resting position with a low, inquisitive growl. Nathan looked up just as a shadow moved along the opposite bank upstream from where they sat. At first, it was barely perceptible, just the sway of branches, the faint crackle of underbrush. But then the shape emerged into full view, a large grizzly bear, unmistakably a mother, her dark coat shimmering with water droplets, her massive frame moving with cautious strength. Just behind her, a smaller form tumbled through the brush, a cub, all fluff and clumsy curiosity. Olivia gasped, instinctively reaching for Rex's collar, though the dog stood tense but unmoving, gaze fixed. The mother grizzly paused at the water's edge, her wide nostrils flaring as she took in the scents of the creek. She clearly saw the humans on the opposite side and let out a low, rumbling huff, a warning, not yet a threat. Nathan didn't move, his breath had caught in his throat. The bear's presence was like a sudden storm cloud, beautiful and terrifying in equal measure. "Don't move," he whispered, his hand gently brushing Olivia's arm. "Just watch." The cub, seemingly unaware of the unspoken standoff, trotted closer to the water. It dipped a paw into the stream, then both, splashing clumsily and sending droplets flying. The current was stronger than it looked, and in an instant that unfolded in horrible slow motion, the cub slipped on a mossy stone and plunged into the creek. A high-pitched squeal tore through the air as the cub was swept downstream, its tiny limbs flailing, eyes wide with panic. The mother bear roared, an earth-shaking sound of pure anguish, and lurched forward, but the water was deep and swift, the rocks slick. She paced along the bank, unable to reach her cub without risking the same fate. The cub cried out again, spinning helplessly in the current. Olivia clutched Nathan's arm. "Oh my God, it's drowning." Nathan was frozen, torn between fear and the helplessness of knowing there was nothing he could safely do. The distance, the current, the bear, any attempt to intervene would be suicide. But Rex didn't hesitate. With a sudden burst of movement, the German shepherd dashed toward the water, his body low and focused. Nathan shouted instinctively, "Rex, no!" But the dog was already plunging into the creek, his strong legs kicking hard against the current as he swam with powerful strokes toward the cub, head held high, his eyes locked on the flailing shape ahead of him. The current tugged at him, spun him slightly, but Rex adjusted, cutting through the water like a lifeline of muscle and will. The cub, struggling to stay afloat, began to sink. Rex surged forward, reaching the tiny bear just as it went under. With delicate precision, he bit gently into the scruff of the cub's neck, just as a mother dog would carry her pup, and began the slow, difficult swim back toward the opposite bank. The mother grizzly, wild with maternal desperation, tracked every movement, her growls fading into quiet whimpers. She stepped into the water, but stopped, watching instead. Something had shifted. She didn't lunge, she didn't roar, she just waited. Nathan and Olivia stood in awe across the water. A hiker, who had been trekking along the opposite trail, fumbled for his phone, his hands shaking as he began filming. The scene was surreal, impossible even. A dog rescuing a bear cub in the wild. Nature's laws were bending, if only for a moment. Rex reached the shore, his body quivering with exertion. He pulled the cub onto a shallow patch of grass and nudged it forward, releasing his hold. The cub coughed and blinked, dazed, but alive. Rex stepped back, panting heavily, watching the bear. The mother grizzly approached slowly, each step deliberate. She sniffed the cub, nuzzled it, checked it for injuries. Then she turned her massive head and looked directly at Rex. For a heartbeat, no one breathed. Then the bear did something no one expected, she dipped her head low. Not in submission, but in acknowledgement. A nod. A gesture that defied all logic and instinct. It was not human. It was something older, more primal, a shared understanding across the boundaries of species. Then, without a sound, she guided her cub back into the trees, vanishing as silently as she had appeared. Rex turned and trotted back to his humans, his legs wobbly but his tail wagging. Olivia dropped to her knees and wrapped her arms around him, whispering words of love and disbelief. Nathan knelt beside them, his hand resting on Rex's damp fur, heart pounding. None of them spoke for a long time. High above, the sun continued its climb through the sky, oblivious to the miracle that had just taken place beneath its light. Rex lay curled on the blanket, still damp from the creek, his chest rising and falling with steady breaths as Nathan gently dried him with a spare jacket. Olivia stroked his ears, her touch light but reverent, as if she were afraid that breaking the stillness would wake them all from a dream. The events that had just transpired hovered in the air, unreal and too profound for casual conversation. They had witnessed something ancient, something that didn't fit into the neat boxes of science or instinct. A dog had saved a wild bear cub, and the mother, a creature whose power and unpredictability could never be underestimated, had accepted the act not with violence, but with gratitude. The Mitchells remained in that spot by the creek for a long while, too overwhelmed to move. The woods around them, previously serene and idyllic, now felt like sacred ground across the creek. The hiker, whose name they would later learn was Mike Langdon, stood in stunned silence, phone still in hand. He had caught the whole thing on video: the cub's fall, the shepherd's dive, the impossible delivery of life from one species to another. His hands shook as he tapped to stop the recording, then instinctively backed up the file, not once, but twice. Some moments in life demanded to be remembered not just by memory, but preserved in the most tangible way possible. He looked at Rex, then across at the couple huddled beside him, then slowly turned and made his way back down the trail, heart racing with the knowledge that what he had just captured was more than viral potential, it was history. Meanwhile, Nathan finally exhaled a long, shaky breath and looked toward Olivia. Her face was still pale, her hand motionless on Rex's back. "Did that really happen?" he asked softly. Olivia's eyes met his, wide and still shining. "I think it did. I think he really did it." Nathan shook his head slowly in disbelief, but also in awe. "I didn't even see him think about it. One second he was beside us, the next, he just went." Olivia whispered, like he knew. Like it didn't matter that it was a bear cub. They both looked at Rex, who stirred slightly and let out a low, tired groan, his tail wagging just once. He was exhausted, but clearly proud. And in that moment, they understood something deeper about their dog, something beyond obedience or training. He hadn't acted because someone told him to. He had acted because he saw life in danger and chose to help. A decision made without words, rooted in something wordless and pure. Later that afternoon, as the shadows began to stretch across the forest floor and the sun dipped lower in the sky, the Mitchells packed up their things and began the quiet hike back to the trailhead. They kept Rex close, letting him set his own slow pace. Every now and then, Olivia glanced behind her, half expecting to see the mother bear again. But the woods remained quiet. Birds chirped as they always had. Leaves rustled in the same gentle rhythm. But the world now seemed changed. There was a weight to every sound, as if the forest itself remembered. By the time they reached their car, Mike Langdon was already there, waiting. He looked up as they approached and raised a hand in greeting, his expression cautious but energized. "Hey," he said. "I didn't want to leave without talking to you." Nathan blinked in surprise. "You were the one filming, right?" "Yeah," Mike nodded. "I got the whole thing, I mean the whole thing." He hesitated, then added, "I've seen a lot of things hiking through these woods, but I've never seen anything like that. That dog of yours, he's something else." Olivia smiled faintly, her hand resting on Rex's back. "He always has been. Just never thought we'd see him do something like this." Mike scratched the back of his head. "I don't want to exploit this or anything, but this is big. People need to see this. It's a story the world could use right now. Would it be okay if I posted it? I'll tag you, credit you, whatever you want. Or I can blur faces, I think people should know." Nathan and Olivia exchanged a long look. There was hesitation in it, but also understanding. The story belonged to all of them, but mostly, it belonged to Rex. After a pause, Nathan nodded. "Yeah, post it. Just tell it right." Mike nodded solemnly. "You have my word?" The video was uploaded that evening. Within hours, it was picked up by a local news outlet, then spread like wildfire across social media platforms. The title was simple: German Shepherd Rescues Drowning Bear Cub. Mother Bear Thanks Him. But the footage spoke volumes. Millions watched, hearts clenched, as the cub flailed in the current, as Rex plunged into the water, as he battled the stream and gently lifted the cub to safety. But what struck people most was the moment at the end, the mother bear's head dipping in silent gratitude. A moment that transcended biology and spoke directly to the soul. News stations reached out. Wildlife experts weighed in. Some argued that Rex's actions were instinctual, rooted in years of search and rescue training, or perhaps a basic mammalian empathy. Others called it projection, a human tendency to romanticize animal behavior. But the public didn't care. What they saw was real. What they felt was undeniable. In a world so often divided, the image of a dog saving a bear cub, and a bear responding with recognition, struck a chord that rippled across continents. The Mitchells were inundated with messages, gifts, even requests for interviews. They turned most of them down, uncomfortable with turning the moment into a media circus. But they did agree to one documentary segment, aired by National Geographic, not to talk about themselves, but about Rex. About his training, his calm nature, his deep bond with humans and animals alike. Olivia's voice cracked on camera when she described watching him swim toward the cub. It wasn't bravery, she said. It wasn't fearlessness. It was love. Love for life. He didn't care what kind of creature it was a baby in trouble. That's all he saw. Meanwhile, Rex adjusted to the attention with stoic grace. He posed patiently for photos, allowed children to hug him during local events, and accepted every treat and belly rub with quiet dignity. But he never changed. He remained the same loyal companion, always beside Nathan on hikes, always curled at Olivia's feet in the evening, always watching, listening, ready. Scientists began citing the footage in studies on animal empathy. Conservationists used it in classrooms to teach children about coexistence and respect for wildlife. Some religious leaders even referenced the moment in sermons, calling it an example of divine compassion expressed through nature. The story became more than just a video, it became a symbol. And yet, amid all the headlines and hashtags, Nathan and Olivia remembered the moment not as spectacle, but as something intimate and sacred. They remembered the roar of the bear mother, the silence that followed, the tug of the current, and the impossible stillness of the forest when the cub was returned. They remembered how Rex had stood there, soaked and shivering, looking not for praise, but simply making sure the cub was okay. They remembered the mother bear's eyes, dark, intelligent, full of something close to recognition. And most of all, they remembered the dip of her head, that silent, humble thank you. In the years to come, whenever they retold the story, they never embellished, never exaggerated. They didn't need to. The truth was enough. More than enough. A dog saved a bear cub. A bear thanked him. And in that one moment, the world paused and remembered what compassion looked like, raw, instinctive, and borderless. In the weeks that followed, the world seemed to shrink around the Mitchells, not in the confining way of too much attention, but in a strange, gentle way that made distant voices feel suddenly near. Messages poured in from across the globe. Letters handwritten in French and Japanese. Emails from conservationists in Kenya. Schoolchildren in Canada sending drawings of Rex beside the bear cub, some with colorful rainbows or hearts in the sky. It was as if people everywhere had taken a deep breath together, exhaled the chaos of the everyday, and gathered around a single shining moment that felt like proof that kindness wasn't extinct. The video continued its relentless spread, translated into countless languages, dissected in university lectures, reposted by celebrities and environmental groups alike. Rex, unaware of his growing legend, remained delightfully unchanged. He still barked at squirrels, begged for scraps under the dinner table, and curled against Olivia's feet each night with the same contented sigh. But everywhere the Mitchells went, eyes followed them. People stopped them in grocery store aisles to shake their hands, to tearfully thank them for sharing Rex's story, to ask if they could pet him. A few strangers even knelt beside Rex, speaking to him as though he were something more than a dog, an old soul wearing fur, a creature who had touched something sacred inside them. Nathan found himself both humbled and disoriented. He hadn't sought fame, neither had Rex. The moment hadn't been staged or anticipated, it had simply unfolded, a crossroads of instinct, courage, and something beyond. Olivia, for her part, responded with grace. She answered letters when she could, especially those from children. She framed one drawing in particular, sent by a boy named Marcus in a small town in Utah. In it, Rex stood tall like a knight, one paw extended toward a tiny bear cub while the sun beamed exaggerated yellow rays above them. On the back, the boy had written, "I was scared of bears before, but now I think they have feelings too. Maybe even sadness. Maybe even love." She cried when she read that, not from sadness, but from the realization that one silent act could whisper to places even parents and teachers couldn't always reach. Invitations arrived weekly, a humanitarian awards ceremony in New York, a wildlife symposium in Montana, a TED Talk on interspecies empathy. Most of them they politely declined. The world was loud enough without them adding to it. But they made one exception. When National Geographic called to ask if they could produce a short documentary, one that focused not on the sensationalism but on the deeper story behind Rex's actions, they agreed. The crew came with their quiet voices, their soft-footed cameras, their wide, respectful eyes. They filmed Rex at home, lounging under the sun near Olivia's flower beds, walking with Nathan along the trails of Whispering Woods, and sitting alertly as children from the local school came to meet him. They asked questions not about what happened, but why it mattered. Olivia's answer was simple, because we forget. We forget that we're not alone in our feelings, that animals aren't just instincts and fur. They feel things too, fear, loyalty, maybe even mercy. Nathan added, and because it proves something I didn't realize I believed, that compassion isn't limited by species. Rex didn't save a dog. He didn't save a person. He saved someone in need. That's it. The documentary aired on a quiet Thursday evening. It was only 18 minutes long, but it was enough. Viewers cried. Some wrote in their journals. Others picked up the phone and called people they hadn't spoken to in years. More than a few decided to donate to wildlife preservation efforts. Something had shifted. The video, the rescue, had begun as a viral moment, but now it had become something else entirely, a catalyst. Wildlife organizations began referencing Rex's act in their campaigns. One group developed a curriculum called the Rex Principle, designed to teach young children about empathy across species. Another launched a program encouraging dog training centers to include interspecies tolerance modules, teaching dogs to coexist peacefully with non-canine animals. The Forest and Wildlife Department of Oregon issued a public statement praising the event as a reminder of the need for coexistence strategies and more educational signage in popular hiking areas. And still, Rex simply watched birds and chased the occasional squirrel. He didn't know about the documentaries or the fundraisers, but his name, and the story tied to it, had become a seed planted deep in the soil of human hearts. One chilly morning, months after the event, the Mitchells received a call from the governor's office. A small ceremony was being planned to honor acts of civic courage and compassion. The governor herself wanted to present Rex with a symbolic medal for bravery and compassion. Nathan hesitated. He wasn't interested in pageantry. But Olivia placed her hand on his arm and said softly, "This isn't about us. It's about letting the world look at him and remember what's possible." So they agreed. The ceremony was held at a local park, intimate and beautiful beneath a canopy of old oaks. Children waved handmade banners. A brass band played a gentle melody. The governor knelt to place the ribbon around Rex's neck, and for a moment everyone seemed to forget their phones, their jobs, their worries. They simply watched and remembered. The recognition didn't change the Mitchells, but it did open new doors. Olivia was asked to write a short children's book about the event. She titled it Rex in the River and illustrated it with soft watercolors, Rex paddling through the current, the cub curled beside him, the forest bathed in gold. It became a quiet bestseller in libraries and classrooms. Teachers wrote to say how children now spoke about animals differently, less like characters in a zoo, more like fellow travelers on the road of life. She looked thinner, wearier, but when she saw the cub limping toward the window, she huffed a low, gentle sound, and Thomas felt the air change. The next morning, she was gone. No tracks. No sign. Just a hush in the woods and the soft trail of memory she left behind. Thomas sat beside the hearth, watching the cub. The storm had taken much, but it had given something too, a story, a bond, proof that the world still held mystery, still bent in the direction of grace when you met it with kindness. And in the silence of the snow-covered forest, he whispered her name once more, Aurora. Spring didn't come easily to Frost Hollow. It arrived slowly, like a shy guest at the edge of a long silent room, peeking around corners before stepping fully into view. The snow didn't melt so much as withdraw in stages, reluctant to release its hold on the land. By mid-March, the wind lost its bite, and patches of brown earth began appearing beneath the trees like old scars revealed after a long winter's bandage. The town emerged too, quietly, cautiously. Roads reopened, roofs were repaired, and stories spread faster than the melt. But the story that mattered most didn't come from the mayor or the rescue teams. It came from the mouths of children, from the whispers of grandparents. From Rebecca Woods standing in front of a community hall packed shoulder to shoulder with townsfolk still wearing layers of fleece and flannel. It came from the truth Thomas never intended to share, but which had found its way into every heart regardless. She stood before them with photographs, not of the bear herself, for Aurora had never allowed any, but of tracks, of Thomas's journal, sketches of the path she had carved through the snow that night. Rebecca's voice never rose above steady calm, never sensationalized. She spoke like a witness, not a storyteller. "We were not rescued by coincidence," she said. "We were not lucky. We were guided by an animal who made a choice to trust, to help." Some scoffed, of course. A few muttered about romanticizing danger, about letting wild things stay wild. But more nodded. More sat silent, remembering the stories that had poured out in the weeks since the storm. Of a bear glimpsed beside a snow-covered fence line, a shadow that nudged a child's lost mitten back toward her hand, a shape that stood still near a collapsed shed, and later, it was found to be guarding an unconscious man trapped inside. Too many sightings. Too many quiet salvations. Too much grace to ignore. And still, no one had seen her again. Aurora had vanished after the storm, disappearing into the thaw like a dream too good to last. Thomas searched for signs, of course, fresh claw marks on birch trunks, overturned stones, the odd broken branch, but nothing told him she was near. Only the cub remained. It had grown stronger by the week, its limp fading as the muscles rebuilt, its spirit shining bright and curious in the mornings. When the sun warmed the cabin floor, he built it a larger enclosure just beyond the porch, a safe space to stretch and explore without risking town panic. The animal seemed content, but sometimes, when night came and the wind shifted, it would pause at the edge of the tree lean and whine, soft, unsure, waiting. Thomas understood the feeling. Rebecca came often now, walking up from town with a thermos of tea and a folder tucked under her arm. She talked about plans, about protected land, about a wildlife corridor that would stretch along the ridge to allow bears and other animals safe passage without conflict. "We could build something lasting," she told him one afternoon as they sat on a felled log near the clearing. "Not just a trail, a future." He nodded slowly. He had no interest in politics or proposals, but something in the idea stirred him, the thought of space not only shared but honored. "They'll fight it," he said. "The developers. The old guard." Rebecca sipped her tea. "Maybe. But stories like yours make it harder to say no." He glanced at her. "It's not mine. It's hers." Still, word spread. A petition gained signatures. Grants were filed. By summer, stakes marked the edges of future fencing, not to keep animals out, but to guide them safely around roads and homes. Signs were posted, "Bear crossing, slow down." Half joking at first, then not. Frost Hollow had been small and set in its ways for decades, but something about that winter had cracked open its sense of certainty. The bear had done something no council meeting ever could. She'd shifted the ground beneath people's feet, made them look, made them feel. The cub was released in late June. They'd waited as long as they could, making sure it could hunt, navigate, and survive without human aid. Thomas carried no illusions. He knew the risks. Young bears didn't always make it. But the cub had strength now, and when the gate was opened, it stepped out, not with fear, but purpose, pausing only once to glance back at the man who'd fed it, warmed it, held it through the worst of winter. That single glance hit Thomas harder than he expected, not because it was farewell, but because it wasn't. It was something else. A promise, maybe. Or just recognition. He watched the cub disappear into the trees, swallowed by green and gold, and whispered his last words into the wind, "Stay wild." Summer deepened, then fall. Thomas spent his days fixing the cabin, splitting wood, attending the occasional town gathering when Rebecca coaxed him out of his quiet. Children waved when they saw him, some even called him the Bear Man, their eyes wide with wonder. He didn't correct them. Let them have their story. It was true enough. One morning in October, he woke before dawn and stepped onto the porch, coffee steaming in his hand. The air was crisp, the stars fading into pale pink above the ridge. Then, without warning, the trees moved, just slightly, just enough. A shape emerged, massive, slow, certain. Aurora. She stood at the edge of the clearing, frost catching in the fur along her spine, her breath clouding in the early light. And beside her, taller now, broader across the shoulders, was the cub. Thomas didn't speak. He didn't move. He simply set the coffee down, walked to the edge of the porch, and stood still. Aurora stepped forward once, then stopped. Her eyes met his across the thinning grass. Then she turned, brushed her nose gently against the cub's flank, and together they vanished. That was the last time he saw them. But it wasn't the end. Months passed. The wildlife corridor opened the next spring. A bridge was constructed across a highway known for animal collisions. Thomas was there for the ribbon cutting, standing at the back, hands shoved in his coat pockets. He didn't like attention, but Rebecca insisted. "It's for them," she'd said. "Not us." The mayor made a short speech, awkward but sincere, then stepped aside to reveal the metal sign mounted on the trailhead. Etched in bronze were the words, "Aurora Passage," in honor of one bear's path and the man who walked beside her. Below was an image, a bear beside a figure in a coat, silhouetted against falling snow. Thomas said nothing. But as the wind rose and pine needles stirred, he allowed himself a small, quiet smile. Frost Hollow changed, slowly but undeniably. More people walked the woods with reverence. Hunters posted warnings about dens. Children learned to identify tracks not with fear, but fascination. And somewhere, out in the deep hush of wild country, a bear lived. She had chosen trust, and in doing so, she had rewritten an entire town's understanding of the word. Years later, the story would be told again and again, by firelight, in schoolrooms, on the plaque outside the library. Some would question its truth. Others would swear they'd seen her too. But Thomas would never argue. He didn't need to. He had lived it. And when he sat alone on his porch, coffee in hand, the snow beginning to fall once more, he would glance toward the trees and wonder if tonight would be one of those rare nights, the kind where old friends returned. Not in body, but in memory. In breath. In wind. In the gentle shift of shadows through the woods. And sometimes, just sometimes, he would believe he saw her. Watching. Still wild. Still watching. Still there. Years passed the way snowfall covers earth, quietly, layer by layer, almost without notice. Frost Hollow kept its rhythm, weathered its storms, and carried forward with the kind of steady resilience that only small towns nestled against wilderness ever really understand. There were new faces and old stories. New homes and old wounds. But through it all, one truth lingered beneath everything like the roots of the pines. A bear once came to a man's doorstep. And that man gave her soup instead of fear. Children learned the tale before they learned cursive. Tourists who ventured up the ridge in autumn were told to watch for tracks that might belong to descendants of a legend. And every now and then, someone would pause at the bronze plaque at the trailhead, trace the silhouette of man and beast, and whisper the name as if it meant something sacred. Aurora. Thomas Reed aged with the forest. He didn't resist it. He welcomed the way time softened his bones and slowed his stride. The limp in his right leg grew worse with each winter, but he never left the cabin. It had become a part of him, just as the woods had. He carved walking sticks from dead wood now, not out of need for income. Rebecca had ensured he was always provided for, but because he liked the feel of shaping something with his hands. There was peace in the act of creation, in turning what had once fallen into something that could support someone else. Nathan set the collar on the stone near the water and whispered, "He's still here. We all are." The cub inched closer to its mother, emboldened by her calm. The bear made no sound, no gesture. It simply remained there, a steady figure across the water, as if drawn by something deeper than memory. By gratitude. By recognition. By a thread that could not be seen, but could always be felt. The moment stretched, suspended in the hush of wind through leaves, in the music of flowing water. Olivia closed her eyes, and in her mind she saw Rex again, standing in the creek, eyes bright, soaked and smiling. She saw the cub gasping for breath, the mother roaring, and then the impossible stillness of that first head bowed in gratitude. After what felt like a full lifetime condensed into minutes, the bear rose, gave one last look toward the couple, then turned and disappeared back into the trees, her cub following close behind. Nathan exhaled slowly. "It's a legacy," he said. "Passed down. Remembered." Olivia nodded. "It's not just our story anymore." They stayed for another hour, then scattered Rex's ashes at the edge of the creek, just beyond the stone where the collar lay. The wind picked them up gently, swirling them over the water like silver dust. It felt right. It felt complete. When they returned home, the forest still clung to them like a dream. They placed the collar in a shadow box beside a photograph of the creek and a hand-drawn picture of a shepherd and a bear under a golden sun. That evening, Olivia lit a candle by the window, its flame small but steady, and whispered into the quiet, "Thank you." Somewhere in the woods, perhaps near Silver Creek, perhaps far beyond, the bear walked beneath starlight, her cub keeping pace. And somewhere beyond words, beyond understanding, Rex's spirit moved with the wind, curled in the rustling leaves, laced in the ripple of the stream. In time, the Mitchells passed the story on to their grandchildren, who listened wide-eyed and breathless. They grew up knowing that courage doesn't always roar, that sometimes the strongest thing you can do is offer help without hesitation, love without boundaries, and compassion without reward. They learned to listen to the world, not just to people, but to trees, to rivers, to animals whose language needed no words. They learned that a single moment, a single act of kindness, could echo across generations, soft as a breath, but strong enough to change the world. And so, the story of Rex and the bear cub became legend, not of heroism, but of heart. Not of dominance, but of connection. In the forest, whispers still carried his name. And every time a hiker paused to listen to the current, or a child asked, "Do you think it really happened?" the answer was always in the silence that followed.